Hey, Vanessa.
Hey, Tom.
Third time's a charm.
Today, I was doing the fourth time, unless we need to explain the three times.
We're sticking with this one. We had 3 bad takes. Now we're sticking to the third one.
Which for everyone listening is like, they can't say hi, Vanessa, hi, Adam.
Yes.
Correctly.
It's challenging. Welcome to Uncertain Things. Today we have our dear friend, Ken Goshen.
Mm-hmm. Friend of the pod, friend of the apartment.
Friend of the pod, friend of the apartment, friend of our hearts. He is an artist, classically trained artist, I think. Would that be a fair description?
Yeah, I think that's how he describes himself, yes.
His art will probably be the thumbnail of this podcast, so that will give you an indication of his talent. And
you should definitely just look it up to get a sense of we mentioned it in the podcast, but Ken really is extraordinarily talented. It's not like we're just talking out of our asses here. So if you're curious and want to see us confirmed, then just go check out his work to see what we're talking about.
We thought we'd stick to this route that we started on with our conversation last week with Adam Neely, because we needed a break before going back into the horror show of existing these days. And in fact, next week, if all the cogs in the machine turn correctly, we should have the renowned, controversial maybe, psychology professor Paul Bloom with us to talk about the nature of evil. It's going to get dark. But true to form, our conversation with Ken focused on not the good things in art, but what's basically everything that's broken about the art industry. So it's we focused on a different type of corruption, or we might call it the intellectual corruption of the art world as Ken sees it.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it is pretty. I mean, the fact that Ken is a person doing classical art in an age where that isn't necessarily as valued as it once was is kind of an odd, anachronistic thing. And so we talk about that, and we talk about why he feels so strongly that the traditions that are being rejected by the art world and industry right now have an incredible amount of value. And he actually posits that are much more in demand than we might have previously recognized because of things like social media and Instagram, making them more accessible to people like you and me, and who get to vote with their thumbs on the kinds of artwork that they like and like to see. So it was an interesting conversation. We got into a lot of nitty gritty stuff.
It made me also think right now, hearing you say that, it's funny that we have 2 good friends who are artists, Ken and Ron, and maybe one day we'll talk to Ron as well. And they're both in this classical space, and there's something very I don't want to call it nostalgic, but there's a tendency to look backwards, to draw on mastery and artistry of thinkers, writers, and in the case of Ken, artists who came before us. Out of a sense that some of that commitment to the tradition has been lost, and that in losing it, we have a vacancy that is not quite satisfactorily being filled by current conversations or current strands of work.
And in fact, could looking back to those old masters, to those old techniques, to those old thoughts and philosophies actually help us move forward at a time that where currently the contemporary art world maybe not fulfilling the needs of what we need out of art at a time like this.
Right. Which one must wonder. We won't answer all those questions, but we'll try to deal with some. And you can follow Ken on @KenGoshen on all the media, especially Instagram. That's his realm.
Yeah, and he's also an art educator as well. And he talks a lot about how he approaches art education. So that if you are someone interested in learning how to paint like these old masters did, then that's another reason why you should follow Ken. It's not just for the art itself, actually.
So onward with our adventure to alleviate the abyss of loneliness and despair of our current predicament, to Ken Goshen.
And art.
Hi, Ken Goshen.
Hi, Adam. Hi, Vanessa.
Thank you for joining us. It's been a long time coming. We've been talking about doing something together for, I guess, since 11th grade, I suppose. But no, not 11th grade. So it's age 11 since, like, what was it? 8th grade?
No, age 11 is younger than that, at least in the US.
11, so 12.
6th grade even, maybe.
7th.
But now we finally have the excuse. Ken Goshen, to anybody who doesn't know, is an artist and of the classical variety, or you might correct my vernacular in this if it's not exactly called classical, but the paintings that look like things and people rather than abstract shapes or poorly thought out ideas.
Yeah, I take no offense to the classical label. I think that serves.
You're of that wonderful, quickly diminishing school, and yet you are able to develop a pretty impressive audience online as an alternative to the sad, desolate reality of actually being a classical painter in the 21st century.
I think you touch on something that you make it sound as if it's a contradiction, but it's actually very, very natural. What's happening today in the art world is, as you may or may not have noticed, the gallery world kind of left common folk behind. If you just venture into the majority of the galleries that you could find today, whether it's in Chelsea or in London or in Paris, the majority of the stuff that you're going to find are going to evoke confusion, right? You're going to look at it and ask yourself, what am I doing here? Why are we looking at this? Why is this costing so much? I have no idea what I'm looking at. And that left a gap wide open that has been filled by more traditional realistic painters on social media. And I think there's a big revolution happening that I like to think of as the democratization of the art market. Because for the first time, people who don't necessarily have the funds to influence what goes into the gallery, because up until that point, right, it's people who can buy art are the ones who dictated the taste and where the gallery world was going. But right now, people can just vote with their feet, you could say, by whom they choose to follow. With their thumbs. Exactly, with their thumbs, with their likes, with their shares. And if you look at the most, you could say, influential painters on social media, it's actually fairly common to see that, they're figurative, they're realistic, and it's some kind of illusion that has taken hold of the art world throughout the 20th century, that, we want art that confuses us and doesn't make sense to the vast majority of people. That illusion is starting to fade away with the emergence of social media and the fact that people can choose to customize their feed, choose what they want to look at, and not have to defer to the opinion of experts on that front, and just say, this is what I want on my feed, this is what I'm going to follow.
Well, I will say that I will push back on the idea that it's an illusion, because I don't think that the people who propelled art into the what you call the more confusing, and we'll get deeper into those definitions a little later, but I don't think that the people who were pushing that trend thought that they were advancing necessarily a democratized market, or a market that is going to be in the service of popular opinion. I think, if anything, they thought that they are presenting the cutting edge of what art can be and how communication through our art should be. So, if anything, what you're doing is more of a regression to a place where we're also respecting mass culture, mass opinion in the art world.
I'm not sure about that, because I wouldn't call it a regression, since back in the day, you might call it, when figurative and realistic painters were the dominant fashion in the art world. I don't think there was a lot of regard for the common folks' idea of art. That was just a situation that, the elites were interested in realistic painting back in the day. Before there was photography, they wanted things to look like them and look like their sons, and that is what they were interested in seeing. What happened with the rise of social media is that really, for the first time, the opinions of people who can't afford art begins to matter. And this is not a regression. This is something new.
It's a little ironic that you're calling it democratization, because when I think about the amount of effort and training that it takes for the artist to create the kind of art that you're putting up in front of the masses, and the masses are responding to it, sure, but it just feels like there's this irony in the amount of effort and time and training that needs to go into it, mastery that has to go into it, versus what you might see of kind of more contemporary art that that training and mastery doesn't necessarily feel evident at all. And so I just feel like there's this odd disconnect between what's happening on the artist side and the viewer side.
It's the democratization of the market, not of the art. Mm-hmm. The art is, if anything, that kind of art becomes more of a skill that you need to work for rather than something that is merely in the conceptual level, but where the technical abilities count for less. But I think I'm dragging our conversation already like 2 steps ahead. I want to.
But I love it. Can I just respond to Vanessa?
Yeah.
Fine. Respond to Vanessa. But I will say, for the people who don't know Ken and are just tuning in and are already confused why we're like at 100 miles per hour. Ken is not just a fantastic influencer who's been able to master the algorithm, the algorithm god, as referred to in our Adam Neely podcast, but he's also a phenomenal artist. His paintings, which if you're going to either follow him on Instagram at Ken Goshen, right? Mm-hmm. Or even check out some of the clips that we'll be releasing, you'll be able to see just how masterful he is in capturing this sadly antiquated style. What Vanessa is referring to is acquiring a skill that requires hours and hours, days and days, months and months of practice to even come close to creating. Art still requires something, some actual craft.
So first of all, thank you for that. I'm embarrassed because to those of you who don't know, Adam and I are close friends for over 20 years, and so we don't often just kind of lavish compliments of this nature on each other. So I'm a little taken aback, but it's okay, Adam. Thank you.
Quite the contrary.
I want to respond to what Vanessa said and say that when I say democratization of art, I mean the democratization of what art can be. In the gallery world, we would very frequently encounter this kind of approach towards classical art, like, man, that's passé. We're tired of it, right? But what does "we" and "tired" mean when hundreds of thousands of people are it's in evidence, it's very clear that they are not tired of it at all.
So wait, you're referring to a time when basically a prime motivator in the art world would be critics gathering around a painting and saying, we've seen this a million times before. There's no point in heaping praise in it because it's basically just a reiteration of a technique that has been honed to mastery. And great. You can paint a really realistic portrait of someone. Like, we've seen it. We know that you can control light. We know that we control perspective. We don't care, right?
It's deeper. The question goes towards, what is art meant to do? What is art meant to do when it's being produced? What's the goal? And very, commonly today, when I'm going to call it gallery world or white cube world, but you understand what I mean by mainstream art world, right? The art is almost always thought of as a communication channel that's supposed to be in service of some kind of higher message. And the art is being judged almost not on its merits, but on how well it's communicating that message. So, for example, if you have something political in mind and you want to express it through an artwork, then at the end of the day, what we're going to be judging is, does the message strike home? Now, for me, this would be like the difference between painting a portrait of someone and painting a caricature of someone. When you paint a caricature of someone, we get it. Yes, that's the person. We understand. It has all the recognizable features of that person, but it doesn't have what a portrait has, which, these are qualities that are important to classicists and to traditionalists. Things like, beauty, right? When a painting is beautiful, to me, it means a lot. It's very important. And in mainstream art world, that is almost like a rude world. Like, what are you even thinking about? What does it mean? Who cares if it's beautiful? It doesn't even matter. So for me, the art has to serve some kind of spiritual purpose that goes beyond the mere message that's behind it.
Can you choose another word other than spiritual? Because spiritual gives me 12 shades of cringe.
Yes. You could think about it as, if we don't want to call it spiritual, we can say cultural. But if we want to elaborate on what I mean by that, I think there is some kind of biological necessity, some kind of biological attraction that we have as animals to be surrounded by things that make us happy visually, which later we call that beauty. Like you walk into your house, you organize things, you have a
visually pleasing,
visually pleasing, visually appealing. And art used to be at the top of this pyramid, like at the bottom. It's like, let's make sure my room's not dirty. After that, let's make sure my house looks nice. All these things that we do in order to surround ourselves with things that visually please us. And art used to be at the top. Once you really want to live alongside beauty, you're going to buy a painting and put it on your wall so that it can be there and make you happy. Right now, mainstream art world doesn't even think that way. If I put something on a wall, it's going to just be almost exclusively because it's a symbol of status. I want to showcase the fact that I have a Basquiat on my wall. I don't even think Basquiat would dispute this claim that his art is not geared towards beauty. He would I think he would concede. It would say, this is not meant to be beautiful. It's meant to evoke another kind of emotion. So there's a responsibility that is being, the ball's being dropped, and who's going to pick it up? Do you know what I mean?
Is that the result of
Wait, can I go back a little bit?
Oh, now you want to go back.
Just a little bit to what he just said, though, about this idea of messaging.
Remember this point?
The behind the scenes of this podcast is amazing. You do a lot of editing.
We do, although to be fair, I don't think we as openly argue with each other when it comes to when we have like David French on.
Damn it. I thought I was privy to something special.
And here's the question of whether we're going to keep this or not will be decided in the headaches of midnight while I edit the episode. My question, the more immediate question, I think it's more immediate, is how much what you just described, the fact that beauty became devalued in the art world, is that the result of mass production? The fact that you can just reproduce a lot of you can have basically your own Monet in your room if you so please, and then the beautiful art becomes hotel art.
I think that's it's a pretty problematic and reductionist view of what beauty is, because now
I'm a very problematic and reductionist person.
That's okay, but I think you wouldn't be opposed to the claim that this almost goes to that aged conversation of the line between beauty and kitsch, right? Because I think when you're looking at hotel art, I would strongly hesitate to call that beauty. I would call it the height of kitsch, and I think it's a worthwhile conversation to have. But I don't think that's where it started. We can trace the origins of basically the struggle against beauty to, I would say, Romanticism was probably where it started. And you could start to see hints of it already in people that today we even call them the old masters, like the newest of the old masters. You start to see it with Goya. You start to see it with Delacroix. You start to see it as a result of philosophical frameworks that these artists were thinking about. Because this whole idea of beauty. Oh my God, this is so up your alley. You're going to love it. We could actually trace it back, French Revolution, Rousseau versus Montesquieu and all that kind of stuff. So if you're going down the rationalist route and taking it all the way back, you get to Plato and, the idealized form, beauty as something that is divine, that we should strive for, that paintings should try to kind of touch on. And Delacroix, on the other hand, saying, no, actually, we shouldn't be looking for something that is perfectible and that is perfect and is kind of out there, but rather let's look inward at all the imperfections that the human spirit offers and put them on the pedestal instead of hiding them.
That's interesting. So the connection there is, if you see Montesquieu as kind of the aesthetic conclusion of Plato, which is interesting, the idea of rationally achievable perfection that through kind of calculation, through
maybe
meticulousness.
Burke is a better. Maybe Burke.
Right.
Burke probably better
because his thesis on the aesthetic or on beauty,
on the sublime,
exactly. Interesting. And in contrast to that, you have the more not primordial, but something that goes to the primal nature of humanity, and this is the savage aspect of humanity, which is not that, but it's also a very specific definition of beauty, the platonic, perfect, idealized version of beauty, because you could still find in Rousseau belief in aesthetic, and it's the aesthetic of the impulse of the
Exactly.
Impressionism is I guess the child of that idea.
Yes, exactly. And that's what this is, a very, very gradual shift, and you're touching on it brilliantly. And I think it's exactly that. It's a redefinition of aesthetic. That's why I'm tying this to philosophy, because they're saying, okay, we're no longer interested in the beauty as the Greeks thought of the beauty, like
the rational harmony.
Yes. We're thinking about beauty as, oh my God, how beautiful is it to record a brushstroke in paint so that we can feel, the calligraphy and the movement of the hand and the bodily aspect of it. And so when you're looking at it in Degas, it's still charming because Degas is close enough to the other tradition that we can kind of see a beautiful merge between the two. You can see it in Degas, you can see it in Sargent, you can see it in a lot of those transitional figures. But the logical end game of that is Pollock, right? It's only like the hand, and we let go of everything that has been there before that has anything to do with a more, how would we call it, Greek style of beauty. I don't know how to best define it.
I feel like I've missed a step, though. Which is, I kind of wanted to ask a clarifying question. When you were talking about Goya and Delacroix, like what is it that you actually see on the canvas that then conveys that there is a philosophical or aesthetic switch occurring? Because that was kind of like I kind of missed that in the exchange that you guys just had, and I feel like if I have that knowledge, then I'll be able to understand this continuum a little bit better.
I'll try my best to kind of piece this together without showing images. This is the challenge. This is where language is going to feel a little bit restricting, but I'll do my very best. In the work of the people, let's just call them the rationalists, okay, just to make it easier on me. But if you're an art buff, then I'm talking neoclassicism is the last representation of these people whom I deem as believers in beauty. What they were trying to do when they were putting the brushes on the page is they had this goal of, I'm going to do something that's going to have a timeless feel to it. And in order to have a timeless feel, I need to take myself out of the craft. So you see almost no brush strokes at all. Everything is super polished. It's almost theatrical when you look at it. And in its worst incarnations, it feels almost contrived because it feels very designed. This is how this triangle is going to look. Here we will have 3 figures. Here we will have 1 figure, but it's going to be larger. So everything is very symmetrical. All those elements are designed with meticulous and obsessive regard for how the frame is going to function as a design. The Italians called it disegno, which doesn't just mean design. It has a deeper meaning, like design as a higher goal that everything else is kind of laid on top of. And contrast that with the people, the romanticists, or the people who believe in the individualization of beauty. Beauty not being something out there that we can strive for, but rather something that is inside of us and that we need to allow to exist on the surface. They were much more focused on, well, let's accept the mistakes as part of the process. Let's let the brushstrokes be visible instead of showing them. Let's incorporate the moments where things are actually, like, all those mistakes can and should be there as part of the final product. So when you look at Goya, he really brings it very to a pretty how would you call it, radical conclusion, because these things, when you paint them, you get scared. It doesn't have this feeling of beauty that is usually supposed to evoke a serenity or a feeling of harmony or a feeling of relaxation.
What specific Goya are you imagining?
I'm imagining the late Goya's when he was already deaf and he was depicting the horrors of the Napoleonic conquests of Spain. Yeah, thank you for that. Definitely talking about that, because early Goya, he's a devotee of Velázquez, and it would be difficult for people who are not art buffs to really look at early Goyas and see what I'm going for. But for the keen eye, the hints were already there that he is more influenced by that way of thinking, and his paintings, they scare the living, out of you.
Yeah, his dark period.
Very dark, very, very dark.
What's the name of the guy eating his son?
Saturno.
Is it Saturno? Yeah, it is Saturno.
Yeah, Saturn eating his sons.
Cronus in Greek.
And actually, there's a beautiful opportunity here to look at how this same subject was depicted by Goya and how it was depicted by Rubens, right? Because it's the same horrific story of somebody eating their son. Yet with Rubens, it's all, detached and galactic, and they have halos, and they're gods, and there's light, and there's stars, and you're like, oh, you know what? After having stared at it for like 5 minutes, I notice he seems to be eating his son. It's like that message is not the first thing that you see, but with Goya, you can't ignore the first thing you notice is like blood and meat and
even the way that Saturn is like contorted. He's hunched. There's something so uncomfortable about and deformed and corrupted about the way that he's standing, and it's the father of the gods, usually depicted as the source of existence, the source of divinity, and he is so decrepit and twisted. But also, let's not forget that for Goya, this is a political reflection on how the Napoleonic Revolution betrayed the ideals of the Enlightenment. This is the death of French liberalism in his mind.
Yes, but it's not
the state eating its children.
Yes, of course, but we need to understand what it means to protest against a political reality through visual means. It doesn't. I mean, today this sounds totally natural because we've grown up in a world highly influenced by Romanticism. To us, it's like, okay, it's something scary. The Napoleonic conquests are scary. They killed a lot of people, so let's make a scary painting. But this wasn't always the case. When you look at how Manet painted the exact same event that Goya painted. Was it the 3rd of May or the 4th of May?
The massacre.
Embarrassed myself. Yeah, the massacre there. I forget the date, but both of them painted the exact same event. And Goya's is dark and scary, and there's like a feeling of martyrdom in there, and the soldiers look like monsters, like shadows from Fantasia or something like that. And Manet is very like poker face about it. It's like, here's the people, and they shot these other people, and it just doesn't get sensationalized. These older ideas of beauty is all about like detachment and stoicism, and let it not be the case that I should sound as if I'm advocating for one over the other, like full stop. Not at all. Like, I'm very thankful for the advancements that the Romanticists have made, and I can actually trace back more primal approaches to paint that I could say were philosophically epitomized in Romanticism. But you can see it if we trace it even backwards. We go from Delacroix and look back, we can even see those influences in Rembrandt, we can see them in Titian, we can see them in Tintoretto, we can see them with all the Venetians, as opposed to the Renaissance of Florence, right? The Renaissance of Florence was very like detached, smooth, almost no brushwork, disegno above all. And already in the work of Titian, Tintoretto, and Veronese, you could see a lot more freedom, a lot more brushwork, a lot more room for self-expression. It's just, when you take anything to its absolute extreme, there's danger there, right? Mm-hmm. And I think on the side of the rationalists, there never was a time when they as a movement took it to a place that was difficult for me to enjoy, like going too far towards the point of taking themselves out of the piece, because I feel like inherently that's very difficult. As much as Ingres is going to try to erase every brushstroke available on his painting, I could spot an Ingres out like successfully out of 10 other of his contemporaries 100% with 100% succession. You can never really take the artist out of the piece. So I feel like that goal is more respectable to me because you almost can't take it too far, in my view.
I have had a small asterisk, and I think this is going to be a segue to go back to Vanessa's questions from like 17 hours ago. The Manet, the 3rd of May, his version of it, it was also not as if that was kind of a continuation of existing style. It was also part of the, I think, like broadly speaking, Romantic Revolution. I think Jacques Berzun had a piece where he's like capturing like 80 different definitions of Romanticism. So it's like we need to be very careful just like throwing around that term. Like a lot of people throughout, I think 400 years have been using romantic to mean very like vastly different things. But definitely Manet was part of a revolution. His depiction of that massacre or that scene of execution as banal was itself rebellious, right? It was subversive.
Extremely radical. Yeah, no, absolutely. That is it's even more, how would you say, contemporary. It's even more contemporary. It has a documentary photography feel to it, like Banality of Evil. Photos from the concentration camps, and you just see like, Nazi soldiers going about
a soldier standing next to a pile of corpses.
Exactly, just casually. So of course, Manet was touching on something that is even more contemporary than Goya's depiction and makes more sense. Obviously more contemporary because he is more contemporary. I don't know if you could say more contemporary, closer to contemporary times.
So I wanted just to use that as an excuse to jump back to the question about message that you had.
Well, hold on though.
Oh, there's so much. Remember the days when we thought, "What? We're going to have a full conversation about art. What are we going to do?"
I never said that. You were. I was.
Okay, maybe.
And I should say that this is the benefit and the burden of speaking to a friend with whom you already have a lot of shorthand and shared conversations. That there's so much I just want to talk to you about and and disagree with you publicly on.
Let's do it.
But okay, so before I get back to the question that I have had in the back of my mind since you kind of established this kind of divergence in the art world and what's happening now versus what was happening then, before I go back there. So you pinpointed that Goya was a bit of a turning point, which is like an early marker of how we started to turn. But at the same time, you're saying still a lot of awesome stuff in Goya, still a lot to learn. Is there another point where you see a turning point, like kind of past the point of no return, where you're like, it is no longer awesome?
Yeah.
Duchamp?
Yeah. No, I actually have a lot of respect for Duchamp, despite the fact that he clearly shot the art world in the head.
Yeah. I mean that painting, a woman going down the escalator or something.
Yeah, nude going down the stairs. Yeah,
nude down the stairs, amazing.
It's amazing. It's also not very original. Because it looks like Picasso could have painted it. Come at me, people. You want to argue? That's not what makes Duchamp special.
Well, they were contemporaries, though, right? It's not like Duchamp was a copycat.
Well, he was a copycat, and it's okay.
I mean, well, he was definitionally a copycat. That was, yeah, right.
Yeah, he was a copycat. I think he even agreed with the categorization of that painting as cubist, which obviously started with Picasso and with Braque. But then Duchamp's most radical advancements, in quotations, to the art world has been actually in the field of sculpture. But I want to make sure that I answer.
Were the quotations on art world or sculpture?
Sculpture, yeah. But I want to answer Vanessa. I do think that something reached a boiling point in abstract expressionism, American painting in the 50s. When you see painters like Rothko and Pollock, getting to the point of literally, just splattering paint on canvas. Now, I have to be very clear about this. I love Rothko. He's one of my favorite painters, and I really dislike Pollock. So this is not a value judgment when I say just splattering paint. Mm-hmm. But there is just paint, as abstract can possibly get. It was pushed to the limit, and it got there very gradually, right? We were in neoclassicist France, and then we had Delacroix and the Romanticists, and then we had the Impressionists taking it a step further, and then the Fubists and the Expressionists, and just, it kept on pushing and pushing and pushing in the direction of more self-expression, less depiction, more self-expression, less depiction, more materiality, less depiction, until the depiction just eventually, it's not like an exponential graph that never reaches a point. It reached a point in the 50s. It's like, okay, there's maximum self-expression, maximum materiality, and zero figuration or depiction. Now what?
Mm-hmm.
Now what?
Well, clearly more materiality and...
No, it's not so clear. It's not so clear, because then came some geniuses like Andy Warhol that said, okay, no more about this expression thing. It doesn't even matter who makes the work. I'm going to make none of my work. I'm going to let other people make my work. That to me was a turning point where things could have gone in positive direction.
You're tickling the Koons area.
Exactly.
Your Koons is showing.
It's exactly true. It's exactly true, because Andy Warhol is a predecessor of Jeff Koons, and of course better than him in every respect, in my opinion. And,
harsh.
Harsh
words.
Truth bomb. And
I think we might get canceled for this.
That's okay.
You'll die on that hill.
At least, I stand by what I'm claiming here.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there, just because this is such an interesting point, and we're really torturing. Well, I assume people who don't care about the art world have tuned out at the title. We're getting into contemporary world and the kind of the malaise of the current art world. So I just want you to dig a little deeper into the consanguineous relationship between Koons and Warhol, but also the difference.
So it's a bit tricky, but first I think I'm going to say a little bit more about what Warhol was actually trying to do. So in terms of how it differs very radically from what happens in the abstract expressionist movement. In the abstract expressionist movement, somebody like Pollock could splatter paint on the canvas, and it could be meritorious and valuable, because every splatter of paint records his individual movement, the movement of his hand as recorded by the splatters of the paint on the canvas. In the most poetic sense, I can describe it as like somebody, some dancer dipping their feet in ink and dancing across the stage. And the more vibrant and interesting that dance was, the more the residue that remains on the stage is going to be appealing. So this is how art was or Pollock's art was conceptualized back then, that it's very valuable because it's a record of a very beautiful movement that happened in private in his studio, and now all of us can enjoy this movement as has been recorded in paint. And Warhol in continuing the tradition of taking things that matter in art and removing them, basically says, well, at the end of the day, everything is images. We're looking at these images, and these images mean something to us, and who cares how they were made, who made them? It doesn't really matter. We're all saturated with these images, and what really makes a difference if I'm painting a painting, or here you see advertisement for Coke or advertisement for soap. Both of these things are images. We look at them in kind of the same way. Let's stop pretending that art is this something special. I want to join forces with the forces of commercialization and actually investigate the images that really matter in people's lives, because how often do you actually find yourself staring at a painting? Not frequently. And how often do you find yourself staring at advertisements? All the time. So the saturation of images in our life, we're actually much more attuned to images that are not made by a specific person, to the author of whom is completely anonymous. So he wanted to engage with images as people actually saw them in their time. So he made things that did look a lot like advertisements. And you could say that they were very smart commentary on these advertisements and maybe even a little bit critical of them. But what made it also genius, in my view, is the fact that he was always completely
deadpan.
How do you call it? Deadpan. He was deadpan about it. He was fully deadpan about it, and said, "No, this is not a commentary of. This is a hamburger." Okay, but why is there a video of you just eating a hamburger? Because I love hamburgers. It's just great because we could go down this rabbit hole of whether or not Andy Warhol was really just a completely superficial person. I tend to disbelieve it because his work betrays, at least in my view, the fact that he knew what he was up to. But basically, it's like, oh, why are you making 1 million copies of Marilyn Monroe? Marilyn Monroe is a very important cultural figure. It's just very deadpan. It is what it is. So the fact that you're laughing about it is it proves the merit of his work. It's this detachment that he was working very, very hard to create that makes the work successful. I think that's exactly what Koons isn't doing. Koons is like admitting what he's up to. He's like, yeah, all this stuff doesn't matter. I don't care. This is a critique of this. This is this. I'm gonna show you how commercialism is doing this and that by. Okay, I need to be less emotional. So everything. The reason why I value Warhol much more than I value Koons is because Warhol took it to the limit. He actually lived in this deadpan performative way, kind of almost like Andy Kaufman of the art world. He lived the joke. And Jeff Koons is like the tragedy, right? He's behaving like a
But isn't
like
Jeff? But even Jeff Koons is an investor, right? Jeff Koons he is the. If anything, he is more than Andy Warhol in some sense. Andy Warhol is playing a part. Jeff Koons is the part. He is the marriage of commercialization and the art world. He doesn't. It's not even deadpan.
Right. So I'm participating in his act, playing the role that I'm supposed to play, which is being the traditionalist who hates him. That's what he wants from me. So I'm granting it.
Interesting.
So in your evaluation of Warhol and Koons, I'm hearing a lot of their intent, about their intentions, about their performances. I'm hearing not so much about the art itself. So when we get to the stage of art world, when you're evaluating them, you're not actually evaluating them on the merits of what they've created anymore. You're evaluating them on their philosophy at this point.
You're on to something very important. I'm doing both, and I should be clear that I'm doing both. So far, we've spoken about this philosophically, but I also prefer Warhol's work aesthetically to Koons's work. I'll take Warhol's work any day of the week because Warhol did something fairly exceptional, I think, in being very wise about creating his work with mediums that inherently, speak to this aesthetics of mass production. If you want to speak about mass production, making video art makes a lot of sense because there is no original. What is the original video? Where is it? It doesn't speak, it bypasses this thing. Oh, I want to see the painting in person. You could screen that video any gallery you want, and none of them are going to be that original. So actually, in the way that he makes his work, there is already the aesthetic premise of mass production. Also, all of his visual stuff that hangs on wall. The majority of them are prints. Silk screens, and silk screens again, they're mass produced. So there's something about the way that he makes his art that tips the hat towards the aesthetic merits of mass production. Koons does this with oil paintings. He hires like 200 painters to paint these oil paintings, and he actually makes oil paintings or tries to make oil paintings into mass production. And I think there is an aesthetic contradiction there. The paintings fail, in my view. They just don't look good.
You can say that Koons is doing the opposite, right? Like Koons is taking a mass-produced product like a vacuum cleaner and turns it into a singular exhibit.
There's actually a very... Well, yeah, but with that I have less of an issue, right? For when he does that,
that's where he succeeds. You think?
Yeah, that's okay. That's his better work. And actually, there's a really beautiful I almost suspect that there's a homage to Warhol there as well in the vacuum cleaner, because there was a group show, I forget which gallery, to which many famous artists contributed pieces, and Warhol's contribution was a performance where he just went into the gallery before they hung up the work and vacuumed the room. He cleaned the room. People took photos of him cleaning the room, and he's cute Adam. You could see that he's just cleaning it very methodically, getting all the way to the edges of the room, cleans the room, and you could walk into a gallery that was cleaned by Andy Warhol. So with a vacuum cleaner. And I think that's terrific. You see, I see you laughing because it's great.
It's great. It's great. The vacuum cleaner sells it, because if he had actually dusted it, like we used a duster or something, or a broom, then you could say that it's more manual labor. You can almost feel his sweat, but no. He's using a vacuum cleaner. It could have been anybody else who was doing that. It could have been an automated, it could have been a Roomba, but no, it's Andy Warhol.
Exactly. I just love that stuff.
If he were around today, he probably would have had like a hot pink Roomba go around the gallery. I feel like that would have been the contemporary.
That would be the Koons version.
I think this touches on the fact that, we're talking about these things and so affectionately, because I do enjoy them. But this touches on something that has also happened to art, which is worth acknowledging, that is, it's becoming more and more and more interdisciplinary. So right now I'm appreciating this art piece not on its aesthetic merits. I'm appreciating it like I'm appreciating stand-up comedy. I'm just thinking that's hilarious and great. And I don't think stand-up comedy is any lesser art form. So I appreciate the wit that goes behind, Warhol's pieces. And in some of Koons' more successful work, you could see that. But in the majority of his work, it's lacking. And so it fails at least for me, on the artistic merits, and it fails on the interdisciplinary pass that I could have given it when I want to appreciate it as a different kind of art form.
Although isn't he, for Koons, and I think this is the last thing we should say about Koons, because we've given him way too much airtime. Yeah. Isn't the performance the very fact that that the artwork is produced by underpaid interns, by dozens and dozens of underpaid interns who he hires to do the most menial tasks of a very trivial artwork? Isn't that the performance?
Maybe, but is it a good performance? Like, anything could be a performance, but does that, what does that make you feel?
I mean, it makes me feel like chills. It makes me feel the horror of to borrow a phrase from our Marxist friends. It's late stage capitalism. This is
precisely. So here, there's something really annoying. There's probably a name for this in German, because what they're doing is, Koons is working very hard to make us hate him. And then when we hate him, they're saying, oh, you can't hate him. He's a great artist. Like, can't you acknowledge the value of the performance? Yes, I'm taking it at face value. I understand the performance. He wants me to hate him, and I oblige. These things are sickening.
No, but yes. I'm just wondering, because when I think about that, when I see the product, it horrifies me just as much as Goya's Saturn. And I'm not being facetious. I'm not being facetious. No, because I think Goya's Saturn tells you something about the corruption and tells you about the end of humanity in some way. When you look at it, you kind of look at the abyss of humanity, right? Mm-hmm. And when you look at Koons, you kind of look at a different form of the abyss of humanity. And I'm not being facetious. I really do feel that. And you don't get that with Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol has something, again, maybe you needed to be in the 60s. Maybe seeing those Marilyn Monroes in real time would have seeded despair in the viewer. But honestly, when I look at a work of Koons and when I think about Koons, I feel cold. I feel cold and dead, but in a very dark, helpless way. So, isn't that successful? I don't know. I don't know what to think about this, but I think it is doing this intentionally. It is trying to make me feel cold. Like, you can say that you get the same kind of horror when you look at shitty advertisements, and when you look at I'm trying to think of a really bad. Oh, there was that. I think it was a Pepsi ad of a rebellious girl. I think she had probably highlights in her hair, and she was walking towards police officers in their riot gear, and she offered up a can of Pepsi, and the officer in his huge metallic hand that grabbed it, and look, the rebels and the establishment can connect over Pepsi. It's that was horrifying. Looking at that was looking at the abyss, right? But that was not the purpose. That was they failed. And going back to Vanessa's point about intentionality, they failed their goal. Like, their goal was to get me to buy Pepsi, not to get me to gaze into the abyss. Whereas Koons is doing it intentionally. He knows what he's doing.
Well, there's an enormous difference between commentating on it and participating in it and what Goya is doing. I don't recall Goya joining Napoleon and murdering people all throughout Spain. It's very different.
Funny, but he was a propagandist in his earlier days, to be fair.
Well, he was pro-Enlightenment. He was pro the philosophical,
right.
You know,
the ideal that Napoleon
I wouldn't
pretended.
say that
yes,
he was. I just think he was really pro liberal values, and I think, you know, we might do a whole deep dive on Goya's etchings, and I think that would be very valuable. But I want to make sure that I nail what I'm thinking about Koons here before I talk about Goya, whom I love so much more.
Me too.
What you're saying the following, if I'm not to strawman what you're saying I'm confronted with a visual phenomenon that illuminates for me the corruptions and depredations of capitalist society and all that can go wrong with it. And I am in debt to Koons for having provided this very profound realization for me. But for me, you know, it doesn't feel any different. You know, it feels worse than, for example, I experience this feeling if I go and I look at like a rugged part of town and I see a lot of homeless people. I'm confronted with, oh my God, you know, all these failures of capitalism are absolutely horrifying. But had I heard that an artist purposefully took homes away from these people and put them on the street in order to illuminate my bourgeois mind to this reality, I'd be like, imprison this guy, put him in jail. What are you talking about? I'm experiencing all these illuminations at the expense of everybody's life. So this guy is shooting the art world every morning. And I'm supposed to be satisfied? Like, I'm not.
I don't often cede points, but you got this one.
Thank you.
All right, well, I'm going to finally come back to this question that I've had rolling around in the back of my mind now for a while. Okay, so when you first described where you feel like we're at in the art world, you said something along the lines of everything that you see in the gallery has come down almost 100% to message. How well are we communicating some certain message, be it political or ideological or whatever, and at the expense of beauty? So I guess I have two quibbles with this formulation. I think, first of all, I don't understand a damn thing of most of the things that I go and see in the gallery, and therefore there has been some sort of severe breakdown in communication. And the only way that I know that there is some sort of political or philosophical intent is when I read the little blurb, and I'm like, okay, maybe I kind of
like, who's the recipient of these messages, you're saying?
So that's quibble one. And not only that, but like, I think if that were the goal, it would be so much more straightforward and essentially propagandist, what I would be witnessing. And then quibble number two is, I do think a lot of people do like some of this stuff when they put it on the wall in their flat, in their apartment. I think they do think there is some form of beauty that they are receiving from some of this art. So I guess these are my two quibbles with your formulation.
And as you respond, I'm going to bring myself more wine. So either you can wait or you can start. It's up to you.
Okay, so from these two quibbles, first I need to concede and say you're right. These both of these things I have not clarified, and I think you're onto something that is correct in how I should probably phrase the word message better. But I'll take the second quibble first because it's an easier one and it's going to make me sound like more of an elitist snob.
Okay.
So, because we're talking about matters of taste, and as we say in Hebrew, and lidvakach, which I think is really stupid, but what it says is like you shouldn't argue over taste and flavor, and smell because it's like your own preference. I think that's super silly because what else is there to argue about? It's the best thing to argue about personal taste, and in my opinion, these people have a taste problem. Their taste is not cultivated, and what you're asserting is sounds to my ears something like, well, but a lot of people think McDonald's is delicious. Well, great, that's fantastic. It's I can't argue with the fact that they think it's delicious, but my claim is that if they spent long enough, in the company of whatever French cuisine experts, they would probably learn to appreciate real food and discontinue their McDonald's obsession. And I love how McDonald's brings us back to Warhol and Koons, but we're not going to go there.
The only difference being, of course, that there are elite people telling them that this is actually the French cuisine that they should be.
And that is a whole lot of corruption, if you ask me.
Well, and just to to the opposite, just to steelman them, I think the way that they see it is a lot of the art that Vanessa and myself too would probably be a little bit repelled by is. They would say the experts, the people who are part of the auctions that get these paintings sold for tens and millions of dollars, would tell you that, no, it is you who need to have your taste cultivated. The fact that, of course, everybody can love figurative painting. It doesn't take work to appreciate something that looks like the thing that it is painted. Like, this is very simple beauty. This is beauty 101. We are at a much more advanced stage of aesthetic, and you need to train your eye and your mind to appreciate the contemporary art.
That's true. And in my estimation, I have done the requisite work, having gone through Parsons and did my degree in contemporary art in the finest university that the US has to offer. I have studied the philosophical frameworks closely. I graduated top of my year all throughout the program. And now I'm making my own value judgments. So it's true. And I did that as a courtesy to them, because I thought, this art is problematic, but perhaps I am ignorant. Perhaps I am lacking in education, and I don't feel like it is my place to judge it before I have taken it very, very seriously, devoted time to it, and studied it very rigorously. Because I'm just like you. I think, who am I? Who am I to judge this before I learn it? Well, I'm not giving it more. I've given it 4 years of my life, and if I can't judge it now, then something is terribly wrong with the way art is being taught in universities, which is also a full topic that we can discuss. But I feel like I've earned, the credentials to criticize it, having gone through a very, very rigorous and serious study of it. So that's for that. And
this is what we call in Hebrew pazam.
Pazam, yes, exactly. And so, to your first quibble, which I think I'm taking it up second because it's the more interesting one. I think the word message is indeed inaccurate, and what's more adequate to say here is that there is something, quote, behind the work, close quote, that is more significant than the work itself. So you're confronted with something that is both sometimes visually and conceptually opaque. You stand there in confusion, and you're like, what is this? Why is this made? And because it's in the gallery, you immediately assume that it's not a silly object. It already has an air of respectability and meaning around it, just because of the context in which you're confronting this object. And you're like, okay, this on its face looks like a silly object to me, but since it's a very expensive gallery in Chelsea, it probably means a lot of stuff. Now I'm going to go and read that label to see the story behind it, blah, 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 blah. But essentially, this object acts as like a portal to a story that exists independently of the piece. Art as like a window that you can look beyond. Nobody cares about the window. It's what you see through the window, right? So that is what bothers me about art. Like, I don't want to see, what's through the art piece. I want to see the piece. Can the piece in itself provide me with meaning and satisfaction without me having to just use it as a platform for learning about something different? And I don't think that these two have to be in contradiction. I do think there's sufficient evidence of very meaningful, narrative-driven, politically radical pieces of art that are also beautiful. Jacques-Louis David in his commentary on the French Revolution comes to mind immediately. But it doesn't even have to be that. It can be much simpler, or it could be much more complex. But I just don't like this idea that enjoying the actual canvas and what's on top of it is secondary to what's behind the canvas conceptually.
So one of the intellectual justifications for putting less focus on the, as you call it, the window than what's behind the window, I hope I used the metaphor correctly, is the postmodernist critique of language as a fuggy tool to convey ideas, where the ideas are what really matters. So the gist of the argument is we're trying to talk about meaningful things. We're trying to talk about structural problems, cultural corruption, from racism to sexism to being held hostage by our economic system. Anything that we need to talk about that deserves discussion in our socially apprehensive moment is being condensed through tools that don't fully communicate the problem, and in fact are sometimes captured by the people who are causing the problem, right? So so the Foucauldian, the classic Foucault argument is language itself is always contextualized in a certain power structure. So it is almost impossible to really criticize that power structure using the language of the moment. And same with art. Art is the aesthetic of art could be argued as either distracting you from a very important message or potentially even obscuring that message, because the language of aesthetic, the aesthetic preferences are already part of the oppressive status quo. So you can't really use that language in order to criticize the status quo. So that is basically the part of the intellectual justification or intellectualizing of a certain movement in art away from what you and I consider an aesthetic, especially if some of the criticism is to precisely attack the historic moment that created the aesthetics that we like, the 18th, 19th century art, probably maybe even earlier than that. Basically, the European tradition that traces itself back to the Renaissance through the Enlightenment. These have wrought a lot of the ideas that some of the contemporary artists are trying to criticize. So using the tools created by that period is already surrendering to that period in a way.
I don't think so. I think that would have been brilliant checkmate. That would have been brilliant checkmate, because their critique of the whole framework is extraordinarily weak, since they already profess to be how to explain it. They're skeptical of the whole thing called art and what can art do. Art is a weak language. Art can't be used in order to talk about these
in the Western context.
Art in the Western context is too weak in order to talk about all these, lofty ideas and concerns that these people have. But essentially, what they end up doing is they haven't proven that they came up with a better language to use in order to speak about these ideas. It's like, okay, if this language is weak, then let's develop a language that's stronger in order to communicate these ideas. And I don't think that is done. There's a rejection of the language out of a political or sociological concern, and say, okay, I'm not going to use this kind of painting because I don't like where it came from and what it represents. Okay, great. But that's not an argument for saying this other kind of thing that I'm doing is filling that gap. That's not proven. It's not proven at all. And if we would to go to bedrock postmodernist concerns, a lot of postmodernist concerns have to do with, elites co-opting fields and alienating them from the public. There's nothing that does that more than the current state of the art world. There's nothing more alienating to everyday people than walking into the gallery and feeling inadequate and feeling like they can't understand anything that's going on there. That's like the epitome of the things that postmodernists are supposed to critique. Like, if you want to serve the common person, have a little bit of modesty and try to actually investigate what is it that people are expecting from art. And this goes full circle to the social media discussion. Take a look at who they're following.
No, and to be fair, I'm 100% on your side on this. And in fact, I would even say that I think that if Foucault would have been like commenting on today's art world, he would probably snicker at anybody who thinks that they have escaped the boundaries of status quo preserving language, and say like, no, you're just doing the same thing. And I think Foucault taken seriously, saying like, you can't really escape it. It's like, it's not you'll just replace one elite with another.
Right. And I think there is something positive to be said about acts of rebellion against dominating structure. And just, maybe even if you're not doing it completely eloquently, but you're just saying, this is a dominating structure and we're going to rebel against it because there's something wrong with it. And I don't like how Ken is telling me that I need to come up with a new, better language in order to deconstruct it. No, I'm just going to say this thing is wrong. But it's completely pathetic to ignore the fact that this is now the hegemon. These guys have been in control for 70 years. So who are you rebelling against? Rebelling against the classicists right now is punching down.
I do wonder though, and I on the surface I completely agree with you, because I have felt alienated so many times by walking into a gallery and feeling like I lacked the education, I lacked some sort of ability or emotional capacity to understand or relate. That said, I can't imagine that there isn't some sort of artistic scenario that I could wander into where I would have some sort of fuller understanding through a different type of interaction with art. And I'm thinking of certain types of like theatrical art experiences that I've had, for example, where there is some sort of narrative and the lines are very blurred between, is this art, is this theater, and kind of getting to this like more interdisciplinary type of art that you were referring to early. Mm-hmm. And maybe there is a potential there for something more kind of disruptive of traditional art, but that can still impact and reach you as a viewer because it can incorporate things that you can relate to
like
a little
Koons.
bit more. I don't know. I know. I've never experienced a Koons immersion.
No. I'm totally with you. And it's very important to say that I am fully on board with these contemporary artistic practices. Like, I'm a fan of Rothko. I'm a fan of Warhol. When done right, these things are very powerful. And I think something that has to be learned from that is me as a practitioner of classical art am incredibly accepting and inclusive in my approach, and thinking like, great, like all these other ways of making art, when done well, can be extremely evocative and profound and have a lot to contribute to our culture. My concern is that this is not reciprocated. Mm-hmm. On the other side, mm-hmm. On the other side, there is a huge, there's a lot of contempt. There's a lot of disrespect, and there's, in my opinion, envy. In my opinion, there's envy on the other side towards people who've actually taken the time and learned how to paint and think that's important. Because I can say, performance art is fantastic, video art is fantastic, even ready-made sculpture, Duchamp is fantastic. I love it. I go to the MoMA, I enjoy, but when I just want to see it go the other way around. It doesn't go the other way around. The real postmodern revolution is only going to happen when these people stop rebelling against something that's already dead and pick it up and accept the figurative tradition as also part of this, cluttered, weird, messy, artistic world that we currently live in.
Do you experience this on a personal level where people like don't understand why it is you do what you do or give you shit for it in a way?
Yeah, a lot of the time. I mean, it's, but I don't blame them. Again, I treat them with No,
what we're saying is we want the gossip.
No, I don't need gossip.
I want the gossip. Give us an example. Give us an encounter where you actually felt that you were stonewalled, or even just just like somebody shrugged and said like, okay, I don't get why you're doing this dead form of art. Why are you committed to it?
It happens a lot in art fairs. Like, to the people who don't know what an art fair is or how it looks like, It's almost like little cubicles, little booths in a huge hangar, and every booth is either a gallery or an artist. So these people can walk by my paintings right in between two other booths of abstract art or contemporary art or whatever it is, kinds of art. So some of them would just walk by and like, oh, I don't get it, and continue walking. But I don't really know how to produce spicy gossip from it because it doesn't bother me. I mean, I don't live under the illusion that everybody needs to love what I make. It's like, okay, if it's not for you, then it's not for you. But it's these things that recur, like, oh, why do you paint things to look like a photograph? Like I could take a photograph on my phone. Maybe a good example would be my bread painting. So to those of you who don't know, I have a slight obsession with bread. I've painted over 30 paintings of challah bread, which on their face look very realistic. Could say photographic. I would be reluctant to say it because I have a lot of issues with that. But some people would think of them as photographs. Now, when people ask, "Hey, like, why should I look at your bread if I can just take a photograph of bread?" My answer is kind of like, if you just take a photo of bread, would that be interesting to look at? And usually the answer is no. Like, no. If you walked by that bread when it was just on the table, don't stop me. I'm going places. I know what you're up to. And so if you just walked by that bread, it was on your kitchen table or whatever, you wouldn't even give it a second glance. But the way that I compose my paintings, clearly you stand here, you're looking at this bread, you're asking me questions about this bread, and this is even before I start to tell you things about the technique that goes behind to painting this bread, and the fact that it has texture, and photographs can't capture everything that we do in texture, and this goes into the realm of sculptures and blah, 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 blah. It's beyond the technical. It's the fact that here you are standing in front of my painting of a bread for 5 minutes before you muster up the courage to walk up to me and ask me questions. If this was just a photograph of a bread with emphasis on the just, probably wouldn't have done it. So there is something there that is aesthetically meritorious, such that you find it there's justification in you standing in front of it and contemplating.
Well, is that because it's a painting or just because it's in a gallery? Like, wouldn't a print, somebody took a a photograph of a challah bread on their phone and printed it in like a wall size a print. Would that not have caused also people to pause and ask themselves, what's going on here?
That's already a move. It's not just the bread anymore. You've changed the scale, you've changed the space, you've done art. Now, where I'm talking about it is actually more significant than it being in a gallery, because I'm talking about the environment of the art fair, where people come in there and there's like 200 artists vying for people's attention. So if there are 20 people gathered at my booth and not in other booths, this is a question mark that we should be mindful of. Like, okay, so we have all the artists making their work, trying to be as attractive as possible to these audiences, and these people are choosing to stand in front of, quote, just, close quote, bread.
It's fascinating because I remember long before Instagram was just a glint on the eye of Google.
Google?
I don't know, whoever. Facebook. I remember there a lot of the talk about in art schools, which I obviously know vicariously through you, is the question of how long are you able to make people linger at your booth or or looking at your painting. And this economy of attention was already there in galleries, and this question of like, how do I justify or how do I cause people to not skip this particular work and just actually take time to look, stare, think, contemplate, observe, reach their conclusions, and then move. And I guess now Instagram literally takes that into account. It literally calculates the milliseconds that you spend on each painting and boosts your virality through that.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, Instagram is the pinnacle of this metric, which artistic circles and art schools have been propounding for ages.
There's some truth in that, but also there's a way to step back from it and see it as something that is more, I guess you could say it, common to other kinds of fields. Like, for example, if you are a restaurateur, what are you hoping to achieve? You're hoping that people will choose your restaurant, spend longer there, as opposed to other restaurants. If you whatever, you have Uber against Lyft. Like, what are you vying for? You're vying for, okay, we want the people to pick our stuff as opposed to their stuff.
No, but I think the distinction is that with a lot of products, for people could say that the only currency that matters is actual currency. Is actually right. Exactly. If your painting sells for $30 million, it is better than the painting that sold for $10 million, even if people stared at the one that sold for 10 longer. For the artist, it might be different. In restaurants, in a lot, everything that is commodifiable, you can just put a price tag on it, and if people are paying more for your product than for others, then you've won. It doesn't matter if they actually spend more time with you. Whereas for the artist, I remember this old conversation of before eyeballs was a metric that was commonly discussed. People were talking about how long are you actually looking at this painting, whether or not it sells for 10, 5, or million or $1. You still wanted people to pay that attention, and
I think that's great.
So what I'm saying is that Instagram, I think, is the first tool that actually translated that into like actual and measurable metric.
I think there's something so interesting there because, first of all, I get what you mean, and I think it's totally correct. And this actually goes to something that's fairly integral to succeeding on Instagram as an artist, and it's completely counterintuitive to what you would think would work on Instagram based on your knowledge of what do I do in the gallery, what do I do on my website, and let me kind of explain that. So, for example, when you put a painting up on a wall, what you're thinking is, okay, my painting's going to be on a wall. There's going to be other paintings on other walls. How do I make sure that people look at the painting on at my painting as opposed to the other painting? So you're basically almost in conflict with the space. The space is providing a way out. People always want to go to the next room, want to go to the next door. You're in conflict with people's mobility. You want them to not move. You want to stop them in their tracks from navigating through the space. So you need to kind of create an immersive environment within your painting so that people want to travel inside of your painting by moving their eye as opposed to traveling around the room using their feet. On Instagram, if you thought that is going to work, it's completely wrong, because most artists, when they start off using Instagram or social media, what they think is, I'm going to paint the best painting, then I'm going to put the best painting on Instagram, and then things are going to work out. But that's just not the case. What that is lacking is actually an interaction with the space. What needs to happen in order for an art piece to be more successful on Instagram is actually to allow the frame to include the context in which the artwork is displayed. So, for example, if you're going to take a photo of your painting, here are 3 options, and I'm going to rank them based on least successful on Instagram to most successful on Instagram. So least successful, just the painting looking great. Slightly more successful, painting looking great on an easel. Slightly more successful, painting looking great on an easel with your hand holding the brush, working on the painting. Okay, now we're talking. And then the latest level is all the stuff that I've mentioned. And in the background, you see the model. Then people are like, oh my God, I'm right there with him, feeling what it's like to be in his space. So basically the weakness of Instagram and why it demands a change in how we're actually conceptualizing our images and putting our image out there is that it's lacking in this relationship of painting to space, painting to room, and painting to room / painting to context / painting to space is actually so fundamentally important to our enjoyment of this visual object that you really have to include it.
You're saying painting to room. It sounds more like painting to the creation. or to the process?
Painting to context, I would say, is the best way to phrase it. Like, this painting as an object doesn't mean anything. The meaning of the painting is given to it by the environment. And it's funny to think about it, but it's even true in a gallery. Even if the wall around the painting is completely blank and there's nothing there, that's still context. This is
no, but I'm saying, but now the framing is the creation process, which it's not in the case of a gallery.
Right. It doesn't have to be the creation process. It's something that I'm very passionate about because my Instagram is heavily geared towards education. And because my Instagram is very geared towards education, I like bringing people into the process. But it doesn't.
So can you give me an example of a different version of that? Of like other context, like another way that an artist that you know on Instagram is using context as
So for example, you could just, let's say you have a sketchbook with a lot of great sketches. You could scan them each individually and make posts from those sketches. That's bad content on Instagram. However, if you take a video of yourself scrolling through the book, that's great because you understand, oh, that's the object. That's how the object looks like. That's how the object feels like. You want to fight against the inclination of these digital media to take your object art and turn it into digital cold image. Don't let it be digital cold image, despite the fact, it's very tempting to do so. But that's what you do on your website. And that's what makes the art looks more true. The colors are more correct. Everything looks more high resolution. But in fact, what people want from your images is to feel the object, to feel the thing, to feel something that is not this alienated robotic experience.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we just had Adam Neely on the last show, and he was talking. We got into this really interesting conversation about clickbait, right? And how he was educating me on like how everything he does is clickbait for the audience of the musician.
And Adam Neely, for our listeners who haven't listened to that podcast or don't know him, he is a musician. He's and
a music educator,
and a YouTube influencer.
Yeah. So for the art world, what is the clickbait of the art world? And can you give us an example of how you've created content that is clickable?
So because I work on Instagram, clicks are not my currency, right? So people don't need to click on my stuff. It's, as Adam said, people need to stop swiping. People need to stop swiping. So that's a totally different plausible, right? You need to have an image that has the feeling of, wait, what? And then people scroll back. Like it needs to be like sufficiently stimulating and eye-catching, and to communicate a lot very, very quickly, so that people either stop on it, or if they scroll past, they scroll back thinking, did I just see what I just saw? And go back. So it's definitely, clickbait's not it's not in my repertoire. And
okay, so how do you create linger effects?
It's exactly as I said, because when you're providing context for your work, people are not just like, okay, that's a pretty painting, but like, what's on his easel? What kind of brush is he using? And then they're trying to kind of decipher all the other elements that are happening in that image. Or for example, if we're talking video, you recently had a video that went very, very viral. And I commend you for it. Well done, Adam. And that video was brilliant because of what we call a hook, right? So in IGTV, the videos that are longer than 1 minute on Instagram, initially you can only watch 15 seconds of that, and then it asks you if you want to watch the full video. So whatever's happening on those 15 seconds is integral, because that's what's going to decide whether or not somebody's going to keep watching or just scroll by. And there you saw Adam Neely say something like, first he started with the following sentence, "I'm going to blow your mind," or something like that, which is like classic. I mean, if you're going to blow my mind, okay, I've already granted the 15 seconds. So now I want to see for these 15 seconds if my mind is going to be blown. And then he whips out a piano out of the dark, just like a piano emerges from nothing, which is a bit of magic. Fantastic. I'm so in. This is 7 seconds in. I have a promise that my mind's going to be blown. A piano emerged as if from thin air. Fantastic. And then he says a question, "Let me know if you can hear this." And the video pauses. So you have to click to hear it. I'm like, what am I going to hear? It could not have been better designed. So that is
100% dumb luck, by the way.
Total dumb luck.
No, but think about it. Like, we're analyzing this right now. Even the way those 15 seconds end, let me know if you can hear this. And right before he plays,
it's amazing.
It's perfect. I could not.
I've been talking to Vanessa when we were seeing it blow up, and I had to like go back and remember what was the video that I actually posted and I when I get to that point of like, let me hear it, because like I found myself, I couldn't control it. I automatically clicked to watch it even though I just published it. I was just like, oh yeah,
exactly.
You just can't.
That's what
it
happened.
Overrides your faculties.
To me, it was even worse because I knew that I'm going to listen to the full episode. So I didn't want to spoil myself. I told myself, don't watch because you're going to hear it in the episode. And I couldn't not watch. I watched the whole thing after being committed to not watching it. And yet I watched it.
I want to hear what's your most successful, like you're generally, like you're an actual successful Instagrammer. We were just pathetic idiots who got lucky, but you're the real thing. So tell me something that you did consciously to exploit the algorithm, not just dumb luck. Something that, because obviously you do a lot of posts, you post daily, you post on schedule, you've made it your profession. But I want to hear something that played out exactly as you planned it, and really blew up. So give us an example.
So, well, I guess it's going to be a little bit more boring, but I think the posts that I make that do the best are literally jam-packed with value because they're educational. Like, I'm going to be teaching some kind of painting technique. I'm going to be showing, okay, today we're going to learn how to paint in grisaille. Today we're going to learn glazing. Today we're going to learn palette knife mixtures. And then the first 15 seconds are going to be like, hey, everyone, today we're going to learn how to paint using a palette knife. The palette knife sketch is extremely important because it has both educational benefits and also artistic merits. End of 15 seconds, you're like, oh, I gotta watch this. It's just a very clear value proposition. I'm telling them, here's something really cool that you're gonna get if you just give me 10 minutes of your time. And hopefully, like, I don't even feel manipulative doing so because I do think that my 10 minutes...
Because you then deliver the promise.
I deliver on the promise. Like, I teach them how to paint with a palette knife. And I think my success has to do with the fact that people have not been taken advantage of Instagram to deliver very meaningful things to people. They think, okay, Instagram, whatever, this is where I go to waste my time. And I have kind of tried to say, well, okay, most people are here to waste their time, but I'm going to make their time worthwhile. If you spend time on my page, there's value in there for you. And this is pretty rare. Like, not a lot of people do it in general. And very, very few artists do it. The people who do it and who gave me the most inspiration are actually chefs. Here's a recipe for making whatever, this cake. So you see, this is how the cake looks like when it's complete. And then you kind of have to watch the recipe because how do you make the cake? And at the end of this video, you literally learn how to make the cake. So I thought, they do it for cooking. Why won't I do it for painting? So I think mine is, I feel like you give people enough value, then they learn to trust you. And then they understand, okay, here is, because recently I've even done something that very, very, very few people do is use up the whole allotted hour of IGTV. And I've started uploading, I think I uploaded like 3 of those videos that are almost an hour long. And I think that is something you can't do if you have a small account. Because if you're a small account and people don't trust your content yet, you see an hour-long video on Instagram and you immediately scroll past it. You don't even think twice about it. You're like, an hour? Crazy. Who puts a super long video on Instagram? That makes no sense for the platform. But after you've kind of proven your track record in being able to deliver a lot of value in 10 minutes or in 15 minutes, I actually think it allows you to go even deeper, because there were these videos that I made that are longer that I thought, I can't explain it in 10 minutes, no matter how much I tried. And I basically put my audience to the test. I asked myself, will they watch an hour-long video? And they kind of are.
I wanted to ask you a question about how your art and your art practice has changed because of the pandemic? Because I think we've had some interesting conversations about what you thought what you thought art education had to be before so many people went virtual for everything, and what it is now. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how that experience has changed your art potentially.
My art or my education?
But art education first. But if it has changed your art, I would be really interested to know that.
So first, education.
No, stop. This is the time, an hour and a half into our conversation, that we actually need to go back and let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background, your schooling, your education, and then get to how the pandemic changed you.
Okay, art background. This starts in Jonathan Hirschfeld's class in 11th grade, Yud Aleph. I think what happened there is almost like a lucky thing where up until that point, art in art school wasn't really taught, but rather just judged. It was like, make a painting about the and I'm like, all right, I'll do what I can. Try to make a painting responding to the. Okay, I'll try. And then it's almost like the skill that I brought from home. I even, it's pathetic to call it skills, but the abilities that I brought with me, my talent, had to serve for all the purposes of the things that were required of me during my art education. And then, in comes this person and says, listen, here's how you paint. Let's learn how to do it. And I was like, what? And the nerdy part of me awoke, because I'm enormously nerdy, and I love when things can be turned into systems and into steps. And if you follow 1, 2, 3, you get this results. If you do something different, you get that results. And I started understanding painting on a mechanical level, like the mechanics of how to build a painting. I feel like if Jonathan Hirschfeld would have taught me manga, could be that I would have been a manga illustrator today. It's just the fact that I lived under this illusion that people are great painters because they're born talented. And suddenly, like, my whole conception completely changed into, oh, this is something that if I learn the right method of making it, I'm going to be able to do it. And that's fantastic.
And then you also spent some time in New York studying art here, and I think
that was before.
That was a little bit before.
No, I went to, when I studied in New York. You mean in LaGuardia? So I spent my 10th grade here studying art, but there was no paradigm shift there. It was all just like, here in ceramics class, try to make a ceramic thing. And I'm like, I like dragons, and I just made dragons. But it's this silly idea in the way that art is taught in most establishments, that you just need to give me a source of inspiration, then I'm going to respond by making an art piece, and then you're going to judge it and give me a grade. I'm like, where in this whole event have I been taught something? Where is the educational value of all of this? Like, you told me you should paint something in your home, and I'm like, GameCube controller, and I paint it. So like, that's not education. That's you giving me tasks. And I think Hirschfeld was the first one who says, okay, this is how you build a painting. This is the first layer, this is the second layer, and this is how they did it in the Renaissance. In the Baroque, they did it totally different. They followed these steps, and I was blown away by the fact that this can actually be taught like you teach a craft. And I was just sold.
I remember the difference between studying history in Jerusalem and studying history at Columbia University. And at Columbia University, I remember we had I took a few history classes, even though the focal was different. I remember being surprised at how much emphasis there was on critical theories, which required you to essentially pick a topic of interest and cram it through the critical lens. Just to me, it's the equivalent of telling you, find an object of inspiration and paint it. It's just take this topic and tell us why critical theory applies to it. But critical theory is only one school of thought. It's only one method of interpreting history, and a fairly recent one. Meanwhile, in Jerusalem, we followed what I assume some faculties in the US would consider an atavistic curriculum, which required us to understand the variety of schools, see the plethora of interpretations, how scholars throughout the past 200 years at least have reached radically different conclusions about the same events because they used different tools to assay them. Once you have that perspective, then you can pick your school and start digging into the events you care about. But until you have that basic understanding, there's this foundational level of look at how people throughout the past 200 years have been studying this subject, you have no business picking up a subject and just painting it in your case, or writing about this in the case of a historian. It's just, you don't. You just stay out of it, read a lot first, learn and understand how those ladders of craft have been developed, and then choose. If you don't agree with them, step out of them and critique them. But first, understand them.
You know what you've done here, Adam? You've given the best critique of postmodern art better than what I could have done.
Oh, well, I mean, I was just trying to troll you.
No, basically what you've done is exactly that. These people are criticizing traditional art. They're criticizing classicists. They're criticizing realism without having gone through the process of fully understanding them. This is true for the vast majority. So I think it's I'm totally with you, and it's not it's nice to see how it can be looked at through the lens of education as well. And also you can edit out the previous part when I said to Vanessa what I said, because I can answer that question. I just
right now we need to get to the point. So all that was a build up to say, okay, so this is how Ken Goshen got his chops in classical art. Basically, for Jonathan Hirschfeld, and then at Tachana in Tel Aviv, you have Aram Gershoni, David Nipo. Those are, if anybody's interested to look up some amazing art, like search Aram Gershoni and David Nipo. They're just phenomenal, and you can tell if you see Ken's art and then see him in the light of his direct masters. You'll be. I mean, I think it's a very edifying exercise. So you've done that, and then you moved to New York, studied at Parsons, got one-on-one with the contemporary art world a little bit, and here we are. 2019 is over. 2020 is about to begin. How do you deal? The pandemic is just landing on our shores.
The pandemic is landing on our shores. So up until that point, I was teaching in person. I was teaching. Okay, first of all, I teach. So art education is immensely important to me. I'm fortunate enough to actually enjoy teaching very much, which is not the case for a lot of art practitioners. Some people do art education because they're like financially they have to. But I actually enjoy it a lot, and I view the basically the task of carrying the torch and bringing the knowledge, giving the knowledge to the next generation of practitioners to be a duty. It's a responsibility. If you have gone through the process of learning something that you deem to be absolutely crucial, significant, and meaningful, if you die with that knowledge, you've sinned against culture. So that said, I was teaching in person, I was teaching in my studio, and I was teaching at my favorite place in the world, which is the Met. I would take my students to the Met with our sketchbooks, and we would learn from Rembrandt, and we would sketch Greek sculptures. And I loved it, and it was very, very fun. And then boom, the pandemic hits. Can't have students in my studio anymore. Can't take anybody to the Met because the Met is closed. Sadness ensues, and for about a month or two, I didn't know if I was going to be able to pay my rent. It was a real concern because the majority of my income is reliant on teaching. And then I decided to not be stubborn and give a chance to this online thing,
which is not an obvious conclusion for somebody sharing your DNA.
Right. So Goshens are known for their stubbornness. And so if you were to ask me before the pandemic hit, if I would ever consider teaching online, I would tell you no, that's not for me. I could never do that kind of stuff.
You can't. No, not only that, you can't teach art
You're right. You're right. You can't. I thought it was impossible. But then, you and I both, and I think you and I, the three of us, being, intellectually minded people, we can kind of find a way to justify and argue for a position that we just emotionally hold and just stand up for it. I think
no.
I feel like I just didn't want to get into it, and therefore I constructed a whole story for myself about how it's impossible. And then
you don't say.
I do say. And so that story had to collapse, and I'm happy that it did, because it provided me with the opportunity to create a completely new venture. So now I teach exclusively online, and the results speak for themselves. I don't know if I've had the opportunity to show you works by my students, but I am just day by day blown away by the fact that they have learned how to do these things from scratch, having never met me in person. It just continues.
And you teach them through Zoom.
I teach them through Zoom. And it's amazing the extent to which this has strengthened me as a teacher. And I'm going to explain. Because up until that point, I did this thing that art teachers do that sounds something like this. No, this mark is in the wrong place. Let me show you. I would grab the brush and I would do it. Right. And this is a crutch, that allows me to explain stuff very simply, very immediately. And then things are completely clarified. But through Zoom, I have to get way better at communicating exactly
because you definitely can't pick up their brush, but you can't even point at the problem of the painting, right?
I can.
Oh, you can?
I screenshot and I mark. I screenshot and I definitely point. I do more than point. I screenshot their work. I outline exactly the problem and I say, this shape needs to be wider by this amount. I can be so precise in the guidance that I give them that it just boggles the mind how amazingly they do. I'm just, every night after I have a lesson and, I see the work that's produced by my students, and it's just inspiring to see what's possible. And I mean, sometimes even outclasses what I was able to do at the Met, because at the Met I would be looking at a Rembrandt and say, here, you see, here I have Rembrandts behind me. So here, do you see this shadow shape? And they say, no. And I say, no, this shape right here. And they say, what do you mean shadow shape? I see the eyes and the nose, and I say, no, but the shape of the shadow. And it's very difficult to explain these things sometimes in person. But then I discovered that on Zoom, I bring up the reference, I outline the shape, and I say, do you see this shape? It's conveniently outlined in red. And they're like, wow, I do see that shape. It's outlined in red. There's just these fantastic things that you can do working online that I would have never imagined. So I'm grateful to Zoom, and I'm also critical. Please allow me to export high quality videos because the quality is suboptimal. Step up. But yeah, thanks.
And sign up for art classes at Ken.
Oh yeah, and if you want to study, yes, that's exactly correct. And if you want to study with me, please visit kengoshen.com/lessons.
So before letting you go, we are indebted to some of your followers on Instagram who asked a few specific questions. So we're going to do a lightning round.
Brilliant. Get out of here, lightning round, as if I can give a quick answer to technical painterly questions. Let's try.
Well, before the technically painterly question, it kind of fits with our conversation right now. Somebody asked whether you recommend art school.
Oh.
Okay. I think if what you're interested in is the kind of contemporary art that we may have been less than delicate in talking about the merits of that tradition, you definitely need to go to art school. Absolutely. Conventional art school, get a degree, get a master's, because it's a more intellectual pursuit than it is a skill-based pursuit. So for that, the academy is extremely well tailored.
And that's the MFA type.
MFA type, exactly. If you're trying to learn how to paint, and what you're asking me is, Ken, if I go get a degree in art, will I get better at painting? No. Trying to get better at painting by doing a degree is almost like doing a degree in swimming or a degree in soccer.
Journalism.
I don't know. You can talk to that. But the thing about journalism and how it differs from soccer is that when I hear degree in journalism, it makes sense to me. But I think when all of us hear degree in soccer, we're like, get out of here. Go and play with the soccer ball,
Right.
and play against other people who know how to play soccer. So I view the more I mature, the more I mature, the more I view art as more akin to sports than anything else, or martial arts. You know, when you want to study sports, you go, you watch the best soccer players, you try to analyze their moves. At first, you try to copy their moves. It's like, what does Messi do? What does Ronaldo do? And try to incorporate them into your own practice. This is what I do when I do master copies. I try to take from my favorite inspirations and draw their techniques into my own practice. And just make sure that you have somebody with you whom you trust. You know, like my two teachers, Aram and Nipo, were excellent. But there are today, you know, more ateliers are kind of sprouting all over the place. If you're in New York, we have the Grand Central Atelier, but
right around the corner from our place, in fact.
Exactly. And they do great work if the classical tradition appeals to you. But yeah, I would say be very clear about the goals you have and what you're trying to attain, and don't expect that to become clearer in the process of learning. It won't. There's a lot of confused people in art school.
Do you think that part of the confusion is because of the marketing of these schools? Schools that actually professionalize in making you maybe an art critic or a professor are also implicitly pretending or trying to convey that they bestow some artistic skill, some technical skill? Is it that the schools are being obtuse about what a student can expect to gain from a degree, or is it that prospective students aren't doing enough research?
I feel like the deception is more self-deception than anything else. They believe that they're teaching you how to draw and paint to the degree that it's necessary in today's art world, right? When you look at Tracy Emin and how she draws, she's a drawing faculty somewhere in England, and her drawings are, pardon me, Tracy, but horrendous, right? Letting her teach painting, I think, is a bit of a it's like, okay, like there's so much that she can teach, you know, because clearly she's one of the most successful artists out there today, and she can talk a lot about performance and site-specific sculpture and all those other things. But you know, you can't letting Tracy Emin teach drawing is basically a recognition that drawing is not important in today's art world. So I think what they are doing in terms of the skills that they give you is they are in full belief that the skills that they are
sufficient. So you're saying when you're saying self-deception, is self-deception of the people who run the schools.
Yeah, they think we did teach you how to draw. You did a full semester of drawing with whatever faculty. And I'm like, oh, so that's once a week for 3 months. And now I know how to draw with a person whose credentials are suspicious in that field anyway. You know what I mean? It's just way lower on the priority list.
Oh, that's fascinating. So it really is incumbent on an aspiring artist to be very clear with themselves what it is that they're interested in.
I wouldn't interested in is big, right? But maybe what it is that you want to learn.
What kind of artistic pursuit they're interested in.
Like, let's say if you want to learn how to talk to art critics in art galleries, forget about the atelier. Like Aram and Nipo never talked to me about any of that. Their advice was, I try to stay away from these events. You know what I mean? So if you're trying to become a savvy art world individual, yeah, you know, you're going to be taught more in the academy than in an atelier. But if what's on your mind is, well, how do I make this thing look like I want it to look? Forget about the art world, the art academy.
I think the last question that I found really interesting, and we slightly touched on it with Adam Neely as well, is how now you showed how you've basically transitioned a lot of your work into pleasing the algorithms of Instagram and becoming an online teacher. How are you able to preserve your passion for the actual art that got you into business in the first place? Or even, are you?
Right now, it's a little bit difficult to talk about passion because we're so deep in coronavirus that I don't remember what passion for art feels like anymore, honestly. Because as you probably know very well, my biggest passion is portraiture, and specifically portraiture done from life of people that I know and appreciate. So up until this virus, I had an ongoing project of portraits that I was doing of my friends, and those were cut short. And so I've been kind of broken emotionally, about not being able to continue the work that I actually want to do. And my response to that has been, well, even if I'm not going to make the work that I'm most passionate about right now, I'm going to make sure that I spend my time building up my skill set so much so that when I get back into it, it will have been better than I was able to do it before Corona.
Well, Ken Goshen, thank you, Ken or
Thanks
Ken,
for
whatever.
joining us, Ken.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for the invitation. This was fun.
And also thanks for listening to all our episodes.
Oh, your podcast is the best. Oh, do I need to tell people where to find me?
I probably not, but let's do it.
Okay.
No, but let's do it. I'm just assuming that people will easily find you, but let's do it.
So for lessons, please visit kengoshen.com/lessons. To support me on Patreon, please visit patreon.com/kengoshen. And for all the daily updates, please follow me on Instagram @kengoshen.
Nice.
There you go. There you go.
Well, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. It's a pleasure talking to you. I miss you guys.
Yeah, one day we might meet in person again.
I told them that I missed them, and both of them did. Let this be on the record.
It was not about the missing, it was about the... do people even exist outside of the cyberspace?
No, the Zoom context is all we need.
I mean, we were really all are part of the simulation now. We're in a simulation within a simulation. People are just two-dimensional beings.
Oh God, don't drag me back in. I need to go. Bye, people.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Uncertain Things. Please follow us on uncertain.substack.com and @uncertainpod on Twitter and Instagram. Give us a 5-star rating. That would be really, really nice. And tell your friends about us. That'll also be helpful. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And until next time, stay sane.